Okay, class, today's learning objective will be to be able to solve equations with rational exponents. So let's go ahead and start with the first example. The first example will be using the product of powers property. So here's the following. We have 3 to the x over 2 power times 3 to the x over 3 power, and it is equal to 3 to the 9th power. And here we need to solve for x. So how do we do this? Because the bases are the same, we have 3 down here, we have 3 here, and we have 3 over here. This makes solving the equation much easier. What that means is we can eliminate these 3's and just focus on the powers. And so we would rewrite this equation like this. X over 2 plus x over 3 is equal to 9. Okay, now one thing to note is that if you recall, when we're multiplying numbers with powers and having the same bases, you're going to add the powers together. Okay, so if you remember, here's an example. Let's say, and I'm going to write this off to the side. Let's say we have 2 to the 3rd times 2 to the 4th. Well, that is equal to 2 to the 7th. And we know it's 2 to the 7th because we are adding the powers together. And just in case you want to understand how this works, we're going to go ahead and rewrite 2 to the 3rd as 2 times 2 times 2. Okay, so that's 2 to the 3rd times 2 to the 4th. 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. Okay, and that's 2 to the 4th. And that equals 2 to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so that's 2 to the 7th power. And this is why when we are multiplying these together, we just add the exponents. Okay, so when we bring these down to here, okay, we are adding these together, and we're keeping this 9 on the other side of the equation. So now, once we have this, it's just a matter of basic algebra. So what we need to do is find a common denominator, between the 2 and the 3, and the common denominator is 6. So we're going to multiply this fraction by 3 over 3, and this fraction by 2 over 2. Okay? And when we do that, we get the following. 3x over 6 plus 2x over 6 is equal to 9. Now that we have common denominators, we can add the numerators. So then this becomes 5x over 6 is equal to 9. Okay, then we're going to multiply both sides by 6. And we do that because we want to get rid of the 6 in the denominator. And after multiplying that through, we know that this cancels out, and this gives us 5x is equal to 54. And then we want to isolate x. Okay, so we're going to need to divide both sides by 5. So we're going to divide this by 5 and this by 5. And then our final answer is x is equal to 54 over 5. Okay, and it's okay to leave it as an improper fraction. Okay, so that's using the product of powers property to solve this particular equation. So let's move on to example number 2. Here we're going to use the power of a power property to solve an equation, and we're going to use the following example. Okay, so we have 27 to the x minus 4 power is equal to 3 to the 2x minus 6 power. Okay, so we're going to solve for x, and the first thing we need to do is find or figure out a way to have common bases. Okay, so if we take a look at 27, that is really equivalent to 3 cubed. Okay, 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. And so all we're doing is rewriting 27 in terms of 3 to the third power. Okay, and so that becomes 3 to the third power to the x minus 4 power, and that is equal to 3 to the 2x minus 6 power. Okay, so I didn't change anything here other than this 27, and we just rewrote it as 3 to the third. Okay, so now we have a power to a power, and the power of a power property tells us that when a power is raised to another power, we can multiply them together. So then we would rewrite this equation as 3 to the 3 times x minus 4 power is equal to 3 to the 2x minus 6 power. Okay, now what we end up having is this and this having the same base. And now that we have the same base, we can do exactly what we did in the previous problem. We can eliminate these and just write the powers themselves. Okay, so then we get 3 times x minus 4 is equal to 2x minus 6. All right, so now that all of the powers are down at the base level, we can now just apply basic algebra. So we're going to use the distributive property and multiply these together. 3x and the 3 times the negative 4. So this comes out to 3x minus 12 is equal to 2x minus 6. Okay, in case you're wondering where this came from, this 3x minus 12, we multiply these together to get 3x, and then we multiply these together to get negative 12. Okay, so now I'm going to continue and move this 2x to the other side of the equation, and to do that we have to subtract 2x from both sides. And when we do, we get x minus 12 is equal to negative 6. These cancel out. Okay, and then the last step is to move this negative 12 to the other side of the equation. And to do that, we need to add 12 to both sides. And when we do, we get x is equal to 6. And this is our answer to this problem. Okay, so let's move on to example number 3, using the power of a product property to solve an equation. And so we're going to show you the following example. Okay, so we have 12 is equal to 8 to the 1/2 power times x to the 1/2 power. Okay, so when in this example we have an 8 raised to 1/2 power, an x raised to the same 1/2 power. When we have that, we can combine the bases and raise the product of those two to the 1/2 power. So what do I mean by that? This becomes 12 is equal to 8x, this entire quantity, this is called the product, to the 1/2 power. Okay, so then the next step is to figure out how to resolve this 1/2 power, okay? And the way to resolve it is to actually square it, okay? So if we square this entire thing, this entire side of the equation, then we're going to have to do the same thing to this side. So what we're going to get is 12 squared is equal to 8x to the 1/2 power squared. Okay? And the reason we do that is because we want to take care of this 1/2 power. Now, if you recall from the previous example, when you raise a power to another power, we multiply those together. 1/2 times 2 becomes 1. Okay? So then what we get is 12 squared, which is 144, is now equal to 8x. Okay? So now it's just basic algebra. What we want to do is isolate the x, and so we got to take care of this 8. And by dividing both sides by 8, we now isolate x and get x is equal to 18. Okay, and so that is our answer for this example. And then we're going to move on to our last example, example number 4. We're going to use the quotient of powers property to solve an equation, and we're going to use the following example. Okay, so in this last example, we have 2 to the x power raised to the 1/3 power divided by 2 to the 1/3 power, all equal to 2. Okay, so the first step is to take care of what's going on here in the numerator. We have a power raised to another power, and so we know from the last 2 examples, I believe, when this happens, a power raised to another power, we can multiply those together. So then when we rewrite this, it's going to become 2 to the x over 3 power over 2 to the 1/3 power is equal to 2. Okay, so if we focus in on this fraction here, we notice that both the numerator and the denominator have the same bases. It's a base of 2. So when we have this, we can actually rewrite it as a quotient of powers, or utilizing the quotient of powers property, which means that we can actually subtract this power from this power. In other words, we would rewrite it like this: 2 to the x over 3 power minus 1/3 is equal to 2. Okay, so let's pause here for a second and take a look. We kept this base, okay? However, we raised it to the x over 3 power, which is what we had here, okay? And we subtracted this power, right? Writing it down here, and we no longer have a denominator. So now we have this number on the left side of the equation with a base of 2, and this number on the right side of the equation with a base of 2 as well. Okay, so if you recall from the first example, when both the bases are the same, we can get rid of them and just work with the powers. Now, there's no power written here, but what's implied is that it has a power of 1. Okay, 2 to the 1 power is 2. We don't normally write that because it's redundant. But in this case, we're going to go ahead and write it so that you can see what happens next. And that is x over 3 minus 1/3 is equal to 1. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this equation up here. So we've got x over 3 minus 1/3 is equal to 1. Okay? Since both of the denominators are the same, we don't need to make any changes, so we can go ahead and subtract the numerator and get x minus 1 over 3 is equal to 1. Okay? So now we want to resolve this 3 in the denominator, and to do that, we're going to multiply both sides by 3. And we get x minus 1 is equal to 3, because these cancel out. Okay, and then the last step is resolving this -1. We want to move this to the other side of the equation, And to do that, we need to add 1 to both sides. And then the net result is x is equal to 4. And that is our answer. Okay, so hopefully that made sense. If any of this was confusing, I highly recommend that you go back to the beginning of this recording and listen to it again. Thank you.